My name is Melvin Fong, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to get a 7 in your Geography IA. So first off, let me go over some of my credit essentials so that you know I'm the real deal. So this is my component score for my IB. Over here, May 2023, Geography SL in English. This is the internal assessment, which I got 7 for. This is the mark graded by my teacher, a 24. This is the mark moderated by the IB, a 24. The IA is out of 25, which means I got a 24 out of 25 for the Geography IA, which means I got a perfect score. So now that you know my credit essentials, now that you know I'm legit, it's time to teach you how to actually get a 7 in your Geography IA. Let's go. So first off, let me go over some general IA formatting. In your first page, you want to have your research question at the center of the page. Then at the bottom right, you want to put down your IA word count over there. Then, next page, you want to have your table of contents. Simple as that. You write your table of contents and the page above after you finish your entire IA. So leave this to the last step. But anyways, let's move on to your criterion A, the introduction. So first off, for the introduction, you want to keep your word count to 300 words. So you can go a bit under, you can go a bit over, but you'll have to compensate for that in your later sections. It doesn't really matter, but as a general rule of thumb, you want to keep it around 300 words. If you have a lot less than that, like 250 or 200, you're missing out on your introduction and you may not be able to get all 3 out of 3 marks for the criterion A. But anyways, the first thing you have to do for the introduction is the research question. All you have to do is simply state the research question. So over here, research question, I simply stated it. What is the pattern of social urban stress in relation to Dragon Center, Shamshui-Po, Hong Kong? Now, for the research question, it's very important to identify a precise location allowing for primary data collection within the limits of the internal assessment. So that is exactly what I did here. A precise location, Dragon Center, which is a mall, within Shamshui-Po, the district, within Hong Kong, the city. So this is very precise. That is what you want to try to do. Then moving on to geographic context. For geographic context, you want to provide a lot of maps at different scales, maybe 3D images and also photos to give the examiner a better sense of the place. So the mindset to have when working on your IA is that your examiner have never been to this place before. Although your examiner is probably your teacher who has done the fieldwork with you and probably knows what the place is like, you want to imagine that your examiner has never been to this place before. So you want to use your maps to explain in detail. And the good thing about using figures, maps, and those stuff is that it helps you save down the word count dramatically. Because you can put blank words like context within the figures instead of actually writing it out on your essay. Let me show you what I mean by this later on. But in the geographic context, you also want to make sure to provide a brief introduction to the place. So let me show you. Figure 1 of geographic context is the map of Hong Kong. Now, a very important part when working on figures is to provide bolts. What is bolts? So bolts is borders, which is this border around the map. You want to have a border around every map. So in this figure, I have 2 maps. In the smaller map, I have a border around it over here. And in the larger map, I also have a border around it over here. After border, you want to have orientation, which is this north pointer over here. Then after orientation, you want to provide the legend over here. Then you want to provide a title, which is over here. In the title, you want to provide the figure number. You want to provide the name of the map that you give it. Then you also want to provide the in-text citation. After title, you want to provide skills. It's not 100% accurate. It's probably only maybe 40% accurate, but it does the job done. You have a skill right there and it looks legit. The examiner is not going to check, so it doesn't really matter. So for my figure 1 map, I have a zoomed out map of China, which is the country. Then I zoomed into the city of Hong Kong over here in the dot, which I showed the map of Hong Kong right here. And after I zoomed into Hong Kong, I zoomed in furthermore into the specific district that I am investigating, which is Shamshui-Po. So this is a very good map to give a context of where Hong Kong and Shamshui-Po lies. So that is figure number 1. Then moving on to figure number 2, I want to zoom into Shamshui-Po to give the examiner a better perception of what Shamshui-Po looks like. So I provided a 3D image of what Shamshui-Po looks like using Google Earth. Then afterwards, I zoomed into the specific location that I am investigating, which is Dragon Center. I also provide a street view of what Shamshui-Po looks like with these rundown buildings to give the examiner a better perception of the residential areas and the district. Then I also have a zoomed in picture of the mall Dragon Center, which gives the examiner a better perception of what Dragon Center looks like. So let's now move on to the actual geographical context. So it's basically just a brief summary of what your location is. So I talked about how Shamshui-Po is one of Hong Kong's 18 districts and is also one of the most impoverished relative to other districts. So keep in mind all these in-text citations referring to figures, figure titles, and also these titles will not count your word count. So you can use as much as possible. Then there are an approximate 424,000 residents in the area, classifying the district as an urban area. Dragon Center, DC. If you know that you're going to use a name over and over again, you can shorten it like this and use DC instead to shorten down their word count. So Dragon Center is the only mall that exists in SSP. consisting of restaurants, retail stores, and entertainment facilities such as a skating rink, and is very popular among locals. So another thing to keep in mind is when referring to figures, you have to refer to every single figure at least once throughout your entire essay. And ideally, when referring to that figure, it is close by. You do not want your examiners scrolling around because that will really frustrate them and that will knock down your marks because your examiners are actually biased and very grumpy. So figure 3 over here. I zoomed in more into Dragon Center to show what facilities are within Dragon Center, to give the examiner a better perception of what it's like. So Dragon Center, within there are restaurants, retail stores, and entertainment facilities, which backs up what I'm talking about because I talked about how Dragon Center has these facilities right over here. Then after the geographical context, you want to move on to the link to syllabus. This is a very simple section. All you have to do is make it clear, concise, and specific. You want to mention the specific syllabus point, not simply urban geography. I'll tell you how to find this later on. But basically, you want to copy this format. The investigation relates to your option, or for me, option G, urban environments, specifically urban environmental and social stresses. That is all you have to do for this part. How do you actually find the specific syllabus point, urban, environmental, and social stresses? All you have to do is go onto your geography guide right over here. So mine is option G, urban environments. And over here, the ones with the labeled numbers are your syllabus points. So there is the variety of urban environments. There's changing urban systems. There's urban, environmental, and social stresses, which is what I use. And there is building sustainable urban systems for the future. How do you actually choose it? Is find within these syllabus points the topics that you'll be discussing. My investigation was about congestion and also crime, which is over here, congestion and crime. And therefore I chose this. But basically on your school website, they'd probably have this organized out, and it's very easy to know what you're doing. If you're stuck and have any questions, make sure to always ask your teacher because that's who's going to be examining your IA. Moving on to the hypothesis. So for the hypothesis, you want to have your main hypothesis and then sub-hypothesis. So for sub-hypothesis, you want to have no more than 3, but I would recommend only sticking to 2 because later on in your crit C and D, which is the bulk of your marks, it takes up 12 marks total. Your IA is out of 25, so that takes up around half of your entire IA. If that's the bulk of your IA, you want to have a lot of analysis there. And you won't be able to go in depth on your analysis if you have 3 variables to talk about because that's going to be very brief. With 2, you're able to go in depth on the evidence and geographical theory, which is what's going to allow you to get 12 out of 12 on that section. For me, even with 2 variables, I was struggling to choose information because there's just so much to talk about. I had to delete a lot of paragraphs. So if you have 3 variables, it's going to be even harder. So I would highly recommend you only sticking to 2 variables. So let's check out my hypothesis right now. So you have your main hypothesis, which is what answers the research question. So let me go back to the research question. The research question is asking, what is the pattern of social urban stress in relation to Dragon Center? Now, in my hypothesis, I simply just answered the research question. Social urban stress will decrease as the distance from Dragon Center increases. That is the pattern that the research question asks about. So all you have to do is answer the research question in the hypothesis. Then you want to move on to the sub-hypothesis, which is a more specific version of your main hypothesis, which includes the variables that you're going to talk about. So for my first sub-hypothesis, I talked about how pedestrian count will decrease as the distance from Dragon Center increases. For my second sub-hypothesis, I talked about how visible crime will decrease as the distance from Dragon Center increases. I simply just swapped out the word of social urban stress with pedestrian count and visible crime. Simple as that. That's all you need to do. Now moving on to the last part of the introduction, which is the justification of your hypothesis. This is where you're gonna have to use geographical theory. So you have to use geographical theory and concepts to explain the rationale for the hypothesis. You also want to add value to images to make them your own. So in this part, you have to use geographical theory if you want to get the 3 out of 3 for the crit A. So let me show you my justification right now. So first off, I have another figure of Shamshui Po. This one shows where Dragon Center is. It's located in the center of SSP. Within Dragon Center, there is a bus and taxi station, and also there's an MTR located very near Dragon Center over here, which is what I highlighted over here. Then I also have another image of the PLVI model. So this is a geographical model which shows connection to geographical theories. So in the justification section, make sure to provide geographical models to support your geographical theories. So I used a PLVI model over here. Then I connected the PLVI model to images of Dragon Center. And also keep in mind, when you're using images from online, you always have to personalize them and make them your own. What I mean by this is just add images or add words to make them your own. You do not want to just simply get it from the internet and put it there 100% from the internet. That actually reduces your marks. You want to boost your marks by personalizing the images you find online. So moving on to the justification. As seen in figure 4, DC is located near the center of SSP, has a bus and taxi station, and is located around 140 meters away from the nearest mass transit railway, classifying DC as a highly accessible location, a location with high foot traffic for businesses, and a transportation hub. Now keep in mind, this is actually the definition of what a PLVI is. I got this definition from the Cordington book, and this is a technique I like to use a lot. I say that DC has the qualities of this definition, and therefore DC was considered as a PLVI because it fits the qualities of that definition of SSP. Moving on. As PLVI has a major concentration of entertainment and economic activities and is a highly accessible location, it is expected that people would be drawn towards the location, and therefore pedestrian congestion will be higher towards DC. So what I did here is, first off, I linked Dragon Center to a geographical theory. After I used that theory to explain why I believe that pedestrian count will be higher in Dragon Center. So I used that theory to explain my first sub-hypothesis. That is what you want to do. And when I'm explaining it, it's just common sense right over here. Because there's more facilities in Dragon Center, more people would be drawn towards Dragon Center, and therefore there'd be more pedestrian congestion around Dragon Center. That's just common sense. But what makes it so strong is that it's connected to the geographical theory. That is what you want to try to do. Then moving on to the sub-hypothesis 2 justification. Due to the high land prices of the PLVI, residential developments tend to be located away from the PLVI. Therefore, visible crimes such as graffiti is expected to be higher around Dragon Center, as there is low risk of getting witnessed and caught by civilians. This is just common sense as well. But what makes it so strong is I linked it to another geographical theory, bid rent theory. So what I talked about is because the prices within the PLVI are so high over here, residential areas tend to be located away from the PLVI, as seen over here where they have lower land values. And therefore, there'd be more graffiti within the higher land values. Because my thought process was when the mall is closed at night, no one would be around the mall, because everyone would be at home, which makes Dragon Center a very vulnerable location for crimes such as graffiti, which is what I tried to talk about over here. And also, when using geographical models, you always want to link it to some images to show there is a connection. If I didn't provide this image over here and only had this model, this image would be very weak. So I showed how the PLVI at the very top is where Dragon Center is located, and the residential locations are the areas around Dragon Center. Even though the residential areas are very close to Dragon Center, not like how I explained it above, so long as there's a model, it makes it look realistic, so it doesn't really matter. You can just make it up like that. But what I mentioned earlier about models helping you reduce word counts is over here. You can add explanations beside your models to help you better contextualize the image or what you want to talk about. So always keep in mind you want to keep these below 10, 11, 12 words. Around 10 to 12 words is fine. If the examiner sees paragraphs within the image, they're going to start counting that towards your word count and you're going to get deducted. So yeah, keep it around 10 to 12 words. I talked about how there's no apartments in Dragon Center, resulting in a population density hollows. So population density hollow is another geographical theory which adds to my marks without counting towards my word count, which is very good. Then I talked about how because there are lower land values away from the PLVI, there are more residential areas away from Dragon Center. So that is basically my introduction. That is the entire Crit A. Got 3 out of 3 for this section. Got 24 out of 25 for the entire IA. To be honest, the geography IA is challenging, but once you understand how to actually approach it, it's going to be a very fun and easy process. So long as you have my lessons to go over and also my entire IA to basically read over, understand how it works, you'll be guaranteed a 7. And in fact, if you have my entire IA and just try to emulate how I write, I guarantee that you will get a 7 out of 7 for the geography IA. So I've already recorded the lessons for the Crit B, Crit C, Crit D, Crit E, Crit F for the geography IA. However, if you want access to those lessons, you're gonna have to join Scholars Pact in order to get those. So what exactly is Scholars Pact? Scholars Pact is an organization that I made for students aspiring to achieve success in the IB. 45 out of 45, 7 out of 7 in their particular subject. So what makes the IB hard is not actually the content or the subject, but how you enter the IB as a blank slate, without any resources or knowledge on how to efficiently study for and approach each test and exam. You enter the IB and are forced to experiment with what techniques work and what doesn't. You're forced to take notes, having to reinvent the wheel each year, not knowing whether or not those notes will guarantee you a 7. Wouldn't it be a lot easier if the notes that guarantees a 7 were already made and just given to you? Wouldn't it be a lot easier if the resources, such as sample 7 out of 7 IAs, case studies, essay structures, were simply just handed to you? Wouldn't it be a lot easier if someone who has already succeeded in the IB guided you step by step on how to succeed? Well, that's what Scholars Pact is about. I've already walked the path successfully, achieving 7 out of 7s in all subjects. There's no point experimenting and reinventing the wheel when I can just mentor you on how to succeed, giving you a step-by-step approach on how to get a 45. I guarantee your teachers did not experience the IB firsthand. They did not do the IB in high school, which is why they do not understand how to actually teach a subject and how you should efficiently study for each subject. Getting a 7 out of 7 in the IB is easy. What's hard is getting a 45 out of 45. For a 7 out of 7, all you have to do is spend the maximum amount of time studying for that subject. However, what makes a 45 out of 45 hard is that you have to make time to study for all subjects in order to max their potential to get a 7 in all subjects. Every teacher's goal is simply for some students in their class to attain 7 so they do not get fired. So what they do is tell all the students to spend the maximum amount of time studying their subject. They do not care if you get a 7 in another subject because that does not concern them. So because all teachers do this, by following the method, you will really only get a 7 in maybe 2 to 4 subjects total because you're maxing out your time studying small amount of subjects instead of all the subjects. But what I teach is to spend the minimum amount of time studying each subject in order to study for all subjects. Our philosophies are different. I don't just want you to get a 7 in a subject. I want you to get a 7 in all subjects. If this is what you truly desire, then Scholar's Pact is for you.